Tonight on MetCast, we're going to be talking about all things offseason, reminiscing about the old times back in 2024. What's going on with the bullpen? How's the rotation looking at? And what's going on with Brandon Sproat? We're going to break down that all next on MetCast. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to MetCast. Unfortunately, last minute, Frank could not make it, but I actually might have a surprise guest coming on live tonight very shortly. I'm talking to a former New York Mets player right now, and hopefully he's going to be coming on in a few minutes. Dan, what's going on? I'm sorry I'm dealing with
It's
all
all
this right
good,
now.
Ray.
It's kind of coming at me last minute.
It
Believe me, I wanted Frank to be here. We confirmed everything. Unfortunately, something came up for him. We'll have him on hopefully down the road, but we're here tonight, baby. Spring training starts. The smell is in the air. I don't care. There's a half a foot of snow outside. Bro, Brandon Sproat, we can get into all of it tonight, but
let's
go
go.
Man.
No, we're good, Ray. I'm happy everyone's here. This is great. I mean, you hear a little bit of nugget about Jose Iglesias today too, which was a little interesting. Who knows if there's a meeting, if they end up having anything that comes from that. A couple notes though. 2 days have taken place in spring training. What has Madrigal done? Maybe that's the reason for this Iglesias stuff. That's an option. Is a trade brewing? Is Acuna on the move? Is Brett Beatty on the move? These are all things we're thinking about. And then two, maybe Iglesias just went back to the Mets and said, all right, you offered me a split contract a couple weeks ago. I turned it down. That was a mistake. My brand is OMG. I am the New York Mets. I hope Iglesias is reconsidering, and I think there's a real possibility that he's back.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I know that David Stearns had that press conference yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday, and he was talking about how like he's got the spot for the younger guys, but I'm wondering, it would be very beneficial for the New York Mets. We all heard that he wants a multi-year contract. Whether or not he's going to get that from another team, I think that's kind of sailed at this point. When you look around MLB, a lot of guys are getting those one-year type contracts, and I think he's kind of in that boat due to his age. And let's be honest, he's a good average guy, on-base type guy. He's not going to be a crazy high OPS guy, but he could be good on the right team. And Magical, he doesn't really hit at all. I mean, he's known for his glove. So if I'm the New York Mets and supposedly they're going to be meeting with him next week, who had that report?
Johnny Trujillo. So he's the Spanish broadcaster for the Mets. Usually I try to stay away from doing that clickbait kind of stuff, but it really was a source, and he kept continuing to comment and like saying it was going to happen. So I think he's pretty in tap with what's going on with Iglesias, and I do think, again, there's a real chance he's going to be back in Queens. Why would you not want him back, Ray? Think about it. I know we've had this talk, and it's honestly between you and I, we know that we want him back, but there's people that say, oh, it's just a one-year fluke. That's fine, but minor league depth is a thing, and hitting 337, that doesn't happen really ever. So even if it was 85 games, you got to give it.
You and I, one thing we always love to do, and I'm trying to finalize this right now, so give me a few minutes, guys. But one thing that you and I always love to do is the lineup construction. And for me, even if worst comes to worst, he's a utility guy. Obviously, Jeff McNeil is going to get the first swipe. Everybody knows that. No one could fault that. But having that insurance off the bench, maybe a late game at bat, you want to sub Alvarez, they bring in a tough righty, or you want to sub, you know what I mean? Whoever it might be. Somebody's going to go down during the season. Maybe, they want to, whoever you want to give a break, you back up shortstop, you want to, you know what I mean? And he's proven himself that he could play in this market. I think that's one thing that goes understated is there's so many players out there that people are like, oh, go get him. I think that's also what the appeal was for Juan Soto. How many stars come here and struggle their first two? I mean, look at Lindor. He struggled his first couple of years here. But one thing that we know, Soto can handle New York. And my gosh, did anybody embrace Jose Iglesias more than Met fans last year? I think that's a huge aspect of things. We don't know if Magical could hit here. He hasn't hit anywhere else. I understand he was a high draft pick, number one pick. But at the end of the day, Iglesias proved what he could do here. He is the perfect backup option. I bet you if you gave him a left field glove, he could play left field too. We all know, we all seen Jeff McNeil play left and right. I think it's a no-brainer. Maybe you bring him in and they compete for the roster spot, almost like what they did last year with Joey Wendell. I think that went really understated. The New York Mets gave Wendell more money than Nick Magical got, right? And $2 million and said, see you later after spring training. But guys, I want to let you guys know really quickly, if you want to get in on the action tonight, hopefully this comes to fruition what I'm dealing with here. Make sure you head on over to YouTube. We're going to be prioritizing YouTube comments because over the last few lives, we just get so many comments and I'm trying to keep up with them. So we're going to prioritize YouTube comments. So if you want to get in on the action, go over there. You just got to hit subscribe and you can comment right away. But those are my thoughts on Jose Iglesias. You want to give your final thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
Candelita. OMG. And that's not the reasons you bring him back. And I say that really because a lot of people think that it's just a fluke. And that's the big thing. You don't want to bring him back because they're not going to recreate the magic again. I don't think that's always a given from year to year, but also, again, he's a really good player, defensive replacement, a really good bat. He's a big league player.
Yep.
So
100%.
You can find those guys. You can think that you have one in Madrigal. You could think you have one in Brett Beatty. No, Jose Iglesias has proven that he can go out there and be perfectly fine. You can cut bait with him at the end of the year if you have to. It's not the end of the world.
I agree. And I think the big reason why they stayed away from him, let's be honest, it's because the multi-year contract. I think, and remember this, for any Met fan who thinks that Steve Cohen's not willing to spend, I still think that Marte's not going to be on this team. He's going to get moved somewhere. Whether it's going to be Chicago has been rumored to be in on a lot of players. They just missed out on Bregman. You saw, Ben Verlander, every day saying Detroit needs to sign him. They missed out. A lot of these teams are trying to get talent in there just to be competitive. And I think a lot of teams, one thing we need to take into consideration, you're going to see a lot of the lower level teams right now try to be competitive because of the CBA that's coming up. They want to say, hey, look, we're spending a little bit of money. That's a big reason why the A's went out there and gave Severino that ridiculous contract, in my opinion. And they extended another one of their players. So I think a lot of these lower tier teams we're going to start to see try to be a little more competitive. But one thing I want to get to, Dan, and I've been on him since we drafted him, second round out of Florida, just like Pete Alonso. What are you seeing out of Brandon Sproat so far?
Fastball's lively, getting a lot of swings and misses, which is great for Brandon Sproat. He has life on that fastball, which is the number one thing. Sometimes it would come in flat when AAA, that's where he struggled. It's nice to see now that he has that extra giddy up. And it's the spring, right? He could be juiced up. He could be just excited.
Oh, I'm sure.
But that's going to continue into the season because he continues it straight through his games. He's a guy that throws 100 miles an hour in the ninth inning.
Right.
So this is what you get excited about, and it's great to see him bright and early in spring training. He also answered some questions. Sean Manaea came up to him. Clay Holmes came up to him. So that's good to see as well that the veterans are taking him under their wing.
That's what if I'm looking at him, honestly, I'm thinking he's a great thrower of the ball. He's now got to learn to pitch. Right. That's the difference between AA and AAA. You could get through AA throwing it past everyone. A lot of these AAA guys are either quadruple A guys that are very successful at the AAA level and fail to make it to the major leagues, or they're former major league players. I mean, let's look at the last couple of years. Many of the top end prospects never reach AAA. They go right from AA to the major leagues. We've even had it done ourselves. So he's a player I'm excited about. And one thing I spoke to, I'll put it this way. I spoke to a league source, somebody who's very close to the Mets. From what I'm being told, Stearns loves, and when I say loves, I mean loves, Jet Williams. And one thing that we saw from the press conference from Carlos Mendoza, his first one he gave the other day, and I'm very excited about it. I would love to get your guys and let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And by the way, like and subscribe if you're here. Appreciate you guys. But we heard Carlos Mendoza say we plan to give reps to Jet Williams in center field. And the even more surprising thing, Dan, he said, we plan on keeping Acuna on the dirt. We're finally starting to see how David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza plan to sculpture this team out in the future. We're starting to see the future actually come to fruition. We've been hearing about it for a couple years. After the Verlander deal, after the Scherzer deal, where are these guys going to play? We have such a logjam. I think it's really starting to show, where we're at.
Yeah. You see Acuna kind of taking that second base role. When Mauricio came up, he was at second base, and immediately I thought, this guy's not a second baseman. He's more of a third baseman. So I think for Mauricio, that's in the cards for him. But Acuna at second, absolutely. All they had to tell us was, where's Drew Gilbert playing? Because that's the only other piece of this puzzle at this point. But
Right.
I hear what you're saying, Ray. And it's good to see that we're finally having clarity. And we were speaking about it in a couple of spaces over the past few nights. It's nice that Mendoza gives these guys roles. He's going to say to Minter, hey, you're a back end of the bullpen guy. Early on in the spring, we're going to throw fire on the whole thing about Budo. He's going to be a reliever. McGill, going to be a starter. So it's nice to see this configuration that you talk about. It's great to have synergy amongst the Mets. It honestly is. So it's good to see. And you're seeing that roadmap.
Where do you, I want to get to this really quickly. I saw it dropped less than an hour ago. And while we're waiting to hear back, and we'll get to some of your comments shortly, guys, David Stearns just did an exclusive interview on MLB Network, and it's, for me, it was a little telling. So let's take a peek at it really quick. Have it lined up for us. Hold on one second. It's not like I could do those quick dropaways like I love to do in the other videos. But let's give a quick listen to David Stearns, everybody.
Congrats on what was certainly a very exciting offseason and certainly no shortage of activity. Soto specifically, we all know why you targeted him. He's one of the great hitters of his generation. But what do you think was the biggest reason why Juan signed with you?
I think you'd have to ask Juan. I think we tried to present to him was an organization that cared about him, that cared about his family, and that was ready to compete at a very high level for the duration of what is a very long commitment. And I think as he evaluated all the different teams, he felt that we were the right fit, and we're certainly fortunate that he did.
David, you talk about Pete Alonso coming back, and I just think it's huge for that lineup. Why was it so important for you to bring Pete Alonso and get him back in that lineup?
He makes us better, and that's what it comes down to. There's no question he makes us better. Putting him in the middle of the lineup, wherever he's going to hit, I think Mendy's still working through that, but putting him in the middle of the lineup, it adds that additional power threat. It provides protection all throughout our lineup, and we feel really good now, 1 through 9, that we can score runs, that we can turn the lineup over, get back to the top, and really do damage. And when we're competing against some of the best teams, some of the best lineups, some of the best pitching staffs in the league, having that additional power threat is really meaningful.
When you look at that lineup, if Pete Alonso is right there, almost like a Soto Judge was last year, do you think the Juan Soto effect is real, that it maybe could take Pete to another level?
Listen to this answer.
Great players impact other great players. So it's not just Juan. It's Francisco Lindor. It's Pete Alonso. It's Brandon Nimmo. It's Mark Vientos, who's an emerging star in our game. I think we have a number of players in our lineup who can perform at a very high level, and I think they're going to feed off of each other. And that's really exciting for us to be able to put 1 through 5, 1 through 6 in our lineup every single day of really high caliber, high potential offensive power threats. It's exciting.
You were quoted as saying, David, yesterday, I will say I feel much better about our starting pitching depth sitting here today than I did a year ago. We made that priority our offseason. Why was that so key?
I think we learn again and again in this game that regardless of how much starting pitching you think you have or how good you feel about your starting pitching, you need more. And we found that out very quickly last year. We were in a spot last year where 10 days into the season, we had to go and sign Julio Teheran to make an emergency start for us in Atlanta because we ran out of starting pitching. We had some injuries. We couldn't recall some players because we were too early in the season. And so understanding going into this year where our expectations are, ensuring we had those numbers of starters to get through the entirety of a major league season and into October was the highest priority for us.
One of the biggest signs that I loved, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, was bringing Clay Holmes in, but then making him trying to make him a starter. Why do you think he could be a great starter in this league?
His stuff package profiles as a starter, and we saw him throw a live yesterday. And I know lives are it's February 13th or whatever it is, and lives are only lives, and you don't really know how it translates. But he looked really good. He's developed a changeup that I think has the potential to be a plus pitch. He has the arsenal to get righties out, to get lefties out. I think he has the work ethic to be able to build the capacity to turn lineups over multiple times. And he wanted to do it. And when you combine all of those things, I think it's a really good opportunity for him to take the next step in his career. And we're excited that he chose us to do it.
So that's that from David Stearns. Dan, you know what's so wild? Think of what he just said. I just threw it out. Yeah, Clay Holmes developed a changeup.
Right. Just under the rug like that.
Right. There's a lot of good things he actually just gave us there. Think about, and we spoke about this briefly off air, and I'll get to some of your guys' comments while he was talking. I was going through a lot of your guys' comments. If you want to get in on the conversation again, head on over to YouTube. We're taking those comments first. One thing that was really, really interesting that he brought up was the fact that he thinks Juan Soto is going to elevate not only Pete Alonso's game, but Francisco Lindor's game, because that's what great players do. And I think we saw it a little last year. Now, we all know Aaron Judge is a great player. No one could deny his greatness, but let's be honest. Juan Soto helped him take his game to a whole new level. Juan Soto was on almost 50% of the time in front of him.
Yeah. That's why when we talk about where does Soto bat in the lineup, where does any of these guys bat, you can't look at the Yankees lineup and say Soto should bat second because he had Aaron Judge behind him. We don't have an Aaron Judge. Our Aaron Judge is Juan Soto. So I think about that. And then I also think about what Stearns said with Pete. He makes other players better. Other players help make other guys get better. Pete's a guy you put right and smack in the middle of this lineup. Love him as the cleanup hitter. I know they had Nimmo as the cleanup hitter. We could debate that amongst ourselves. But yeah, Pete's the guy. He's one of the glues, the engines, the cylinders of this whole thing. And without him, we kind of fall flat. But now that you have that extra cushion with Soto, I think this team's fine.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get to some of these comments. Stanley, will Iglesias return? Look, it's funny. I feel like we were just here with another former player. If you asked me a week ago, I'd probably say no. But the fact that the New York Mets are getting a meeting with him tells me that there's no other multi-year suitors. And if he's going to settle for a one-year contract, what Steve Cohen has always said, if he's going to go past 301, he's going to blow past it. So I actually think there's a above 50% chance that he returns. What do you think?
Spot on. I think it's even more than 50% at this point because the two parties probably came together in some way and said, can we get this done? He's a Boris client. You have that relationship already there. 100%. So I don't know. The projected payroll right now is 320. It's 321 projected 324. That's way over the 301 that we were talking about. So to your point, Ray, absolutely. They're willing to blow through it, and that's fine. Iglesias isn't going to break the bank, but he's a guy that you want back on this team. And the fact that you even are meeting with him, that's great. Continue to meet with him. Do whatever you have to do. He knows that it's the best place for him in New York for his music career and also to just continue to play baseball because, like you said, Ray, those multi-year deals have not come. And I don't 100%.
Think they will. Now, guys, scratch what I said earlier. I didn't know Frank was going to be able to join us, but he is now here. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. It's all right. You're a little behind schedule. It happens. That's what happens.
Yeah, I was finishing up a Tank Cooks episode, and it just slipped my mind. Yeah.
It's all good.
All good. No sweat at all, Frank. Thanks so much. For everybody who doesn't know, who the hell doesn't know Frank? Frank, I've met you actually like 10 times in person, but you meet literally everybody. I know where your tickets are. I always say what's up whenever I
actually moved this year. I moved to a different seats this year. So
are you still on the first base line?
No, third base side now.
Oh, okay. Why'd you do that? Why'd you move?
Because I want to see the scoreboard.
There you go.
That makes total sense. But Frank, I want to start things off just a quick reminisce of 2024, if you could, and then we'll get into this offseason. I know your knowledge of the game. I always follow you. I love the documentaries that you do. The one that you did on the Oakland Athletics was one of my favorite things that I actually watched, because you went into the deep dive into how crappy the stadium is, how the ownership, the Moneyball thing. It was really cool to watch. But one thing that I want to lead off with is, I know how bad we were at the beginning of the season last year, losing that 11 games in a row, bringing in Jose Iglesias. What was the ride like for you towards the end of the season? And when did you finally become a believer in this team?
You know, they started 0-5. They were 11 games under 500 in May, June. I really thought it was just that they were never going to be in contention. And they had a June where they actually had a winning record. I mean, it's probably one of the best Junes they've ever had. No June soon this year. And then, okay, so they got back over 500. So they got to July, and they're not in the wild card yet. And I thought that maybe the other teams would pull away and the Mets would fall at the wayside, but find a way to have a solid 84-win season. And then September rolled around, and all of a sudden they're in the race, and they're hanging around, and they just hung, and then finally it's like, okay, they could actually make the playoffs. They can make the playoffs. And lo and behold, they slayed that beast in fucking Atlanta. They won that.
Yes, they did.
Game.
Finally, right?
I mean, all the frustration in Atlanta, and that game just like was a compilation of everything the Mets have been about. I mean, they were trailing, then they took the lead, only to blow it. Edwin Diaz meltdown. Braves get the lead back. Now we're going into ninth. Braves on the verge of clinching a playoff spot, and the Mets would have to win Game 2 after having their heart ripped out of their chest. You know what? The Mets aren't winning Game 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Braves put that pitcher out there who the Mets never faced before. And he was no-hitting them through 6 innings. And the Mets really didn't care. We say clinched the first game. And that game was played in 90 minutes flat or something like that, where both teams were like the Mets just wanted to get out of there and get to Milwaukee or wherever. They didn't really want to go to San Diego, so they didn't really want to win the game.
Right.
Yeah, no,
I didn't want any part of San Diego either.
No,
yeah, they didn't want to go to San Diego.
I was having nightmares a couple of years ago when we got our asses kicked by with our guys.
So they
out
found
there.
a way to so they won their game, and just the drama just started from there. We got the hate rally, of course, during the Braves game, and then Pete Alonso, who really for the most part had a disappointing season last year.
Very much.
I don't even think they'd even bring him back if it wasn't for a home run in Milwaukee. I think he would be gone.
Yeah.
You really think he'd be a Blue Jay?
You know what? He might still be a free agent. Yeah. I think right now Toronto's having problems because people don't want to play in Canada.
Yeah.
Well, he's kicking himself now that Bregman got all the money in the world, and he could have just waited a couple more weeks and probably got his.
No, they have the same agents.
Yeah, well,
Bregman's a little different situation.
Right.
How many third basemen are out there? How many third basemen, second basemen are out there? The Red Sox are actually going to try to play Bregman at second base.
Mm-hmm.
How many versus how many first basemen are out there?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Frank.
It's a lower value position, first base.
How do you feel that Pete's back? What was your instant reaction? Happy, sad?
I thought the Mets played it right. I thought unless Pete took money and followed Boris's lead, he'd come back. He wanted to come back. This is where he wants to be. It's a 2-year contract. I don't know if the Mets want to commit beyond 2 years. I think he maybe, and it's a 1-year opt-out. I mean, maybe he has a good enough year where the Mets come back in and give him the multi-year deal. Or if he continues to show decline, you could go, okay, well, it's been great. Hopefully he'll get to 28 home runs and break Darryl Strawberry's record. Okay, there you are. You're forever part of the franchise. But now we got other players, and you see, Pete Alonso is. You don't want to give him a lot of years because look what the Angels are going through with Anthony Rendon.
Right.
I think Pete Alonso either is going to have 1 or 2 at most great years left because just the type of player he is. He's not very athletic. He doesn't have much mobility at first base. Eventually, he'll probably end up having to become a DH, which Juan Soto might be the DH in about 4 or 5 years. So you already have that there. And the Mets have other first base options. You got Ryan Clifford, who's like 2-3 years away. Or they could maybe even go after Vlad Guerrero, who supposedly the Mets already signed his younger brother.
They're thinking ahead.
And the Mets, the Mets did this whole family thing. Alex Cone might be the Mets' secret weapon. Forget about Stevie Cone. Alex might be the Mets' secret weapon.
Yeah.
And just being Latina, being from Puerto Rico, having that, being able to talk to players and talk to their families in a different way, I think that's a secret weapon that the Mets are really gonna benefit from. Steve Cohen's got the money, of course, but I think Alex Cone. I don't think we truly appreciate how much her involvement, being like the first lady of the Mets, is helping the team. I think Alex Cone is a big part of some of the Mets' success in landing players and just creating a family atmosphere.
One more from me. Biggest fish in the pond we landed, Juan Soto. What was your instant reaction to that, and what's the ceiling of the Mets now with Juan Soto?
They're going to win a World Series in the next 5 years.
Let's go, Frank. Let's go.
They're going to win a World Series in the next 5 years.
I agree.
It took the Dodgers. People forget about this. The Dodgers were a team that was on the verge of ruin about 12 years ago. They had O'Malley sold to Fox. Fox didn't like being involved, so the Fox sold it to I forgot the McCourt family, and they had an ugly divorce. And the divorce put the team was in turmoil because the McCourts were going through an ugly, bitter divorce, and they were fighting over the team's finances. And then the team got sold, and the new owners came in and committed all the money. And it took a few years. It took a few years, but they've been consistently successful. And they do sign a lot of free agents. They do have what seems to be an unfair advantage at landing Japanese players. But a lot of their base is homegrown players, and the Mets are starting that. They're trying to build a farm system. It took a few years, but they finally got rid of the Wilpon morons. Stern seems to have a good front office, finally getting player development back on track, which has not been on track for 20 years.
Yep.
And now the Mets have flexibility. They have payroll, and they have a good leeway into the Latin market.
Right.
Frank, what do you take away from Kodai Senga's comments about if you want to get these Japanese players here, you got to put a roof over the stadium. Do you take any seriousness with that, or is it's just geographic that
It's
LA
geographic.
4 hours closer to?
It's geographic.
But then why don't you see these guys ever go to? I don't know. Outside of you, Darvish, no one's going to the Padres or the Giants or Seattle.
They do. They do go to Seattle.
I guess.
Ichiro?
Oh yeah, that's what 30 years ago.
Seattle's cheap.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, they've landed a few Japanese players over the time. San Diego tries, and the Angels are kind of incompetent.
Yeah, they are.
The one guy who hates Steve Cohen. For anybody who doesn't like Steve Cohen, Alex Rodriguez almost took out tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in loans to buy the Mets. That was our saving grace. I think it right. Am I wrong, Frank? I mean, we would have been the Wilpons worse if he would have purchased the team, because he would have capped our payroll at $110 million.
Yeah, he wasn't right. He has actually found ownership in the NBA, which is someone in his financial stratosphere is good for him. He'll probably sell the Timberwolves in about 5 years, and then he'll be able to buy a major league team.
Yeah, you're right. I want to ask you another question, because we've had a lot of debates here on MetCast, us with the audience, and shout out to everybody who's in here right now. If you want to get involved, make sure you head on over to YouTube, give us a comment over there. But I wanted to ask you one thing. I am a big proponent of a sole designated hitter. I think all the great teams have them. You see Giancarlo Stanton over with the Yankees. You saw, even last year with us, even though he wasn't that great, he did have his moments. JD Martinez. You got the Schwarbers with Philly. You have,
Ohtani last year.
Ohtani with LA. And we're bringing in Jesse Winker, who, I'm going to be honest with you, Frank, I was not a fan of. I think he sucked down the stretch.
I like Jesse Winker.
But as a full-time DH, I'm not. Now, you want to tell me Nimmo's got a bad foot. They're going to be DHing him a lot. That's why they brought in Winker to play a lot of left field potentially. You might be able to sell me on that. But I like the big stick, Frank. I'm one of those guys. But give me the big stick in the middle of the lineup.
Well, they have options at DH. They have options. And Winker's not going to play every day at DH.
Mm-hmm.
He'll play a lot of DH, but he won't be there every day. Keep in mind, there's a player that I don't know if he's going to be on the opening day roster, but the only room for him is at DH right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about Starling Marte.
I think he's getting traded.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Marte's gone. But if Marte's still on the roster, he's your DH.
Right.
And then Jesse Winker are going to share the DH spot. Jeff McNeil might play a lot of DH.
Yeah.
If you have a full-time DH, you have a full-time DH. If you don't, you don't. And the Mets have flexibility where they could give it someone what they call a half day off.
Right.
Roster flexibility is always a good thing. You do have the sole DH in Philly because Kyle Schwarber can't play any position. You have the sole DH in LA because you don't really want to put Ohtani in the field when he's not pitching. You have the sole DH in the Bronx because Giancarlo Stanton, if he walked out to the outfield, he'll probably tear a hamstring.
Yeah.
But they're winning with those teams. I mean, look at what Ohtani and Stanton meant to those World Series runs.
It doesn't matter. It's like it's a flexibility position. Some teams don't have a catcher. Some teams don't have a second baseman.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams don't have a shortstop. It's just the Mets don't have that DH that you point out. And JD Martinez, he's going to be playing pickleball soon.
Yeah,
I think JD Martinez has played his last major league game.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I heard you talking about that whether Jose Iglesias is going to come back or not.
Yeah.
They have a meeting with him supposedly next week.
I don't think he can replicate what he did last year.
I agree. But he can't be worse than Nick Magical.
Well,
What is his career OPS? It's got to be what, 630?
But I think having him around is a good thing, and maybe the Mets just bring him back for his leadership. Of course, Madrigal has a 2-way contract, so he go down to the minors.
Mm-hmm.
You don't forget about that. So I think the idea is actually they don't really that they might want to keep a roster spot open in case Ronnie Mauricio or Luis Acuna have the type of spring training where you can't send them to the minors.
Right.
But I think having Iglesias around for his leadership is good. And I'd like to have Jose Iglesias in the organization as a coach more than a player.
How do you feel about Mauricio at third base long term, or do you see him at another position
He's
long
not
term?
playing third base.
Okay.
He's not playing third base. Maybe second base. Maybe he gets traded.
Okay.
I
take it you're not high on him, Frank.
You put him at third base. Where are you putting Vientos?
I know. That's the
Well,
issue.
maybe it could be after this year, say Pete ends up being a 1-year deal and opts out, that does open that position. I know Mauricio's
maybe down the
24
road.
this year. They
Down
love
the
his
road.
exit velo. That's
Yeah, this year
supposedly
it's
what
going to
it
be
is.
Vientos for sure.
But when I think third base, I think Vientos.
Right.
Yeah, you got to find a position for Mauricio though. I don't know where it would be.
Well,
I think
he can play three infield positions.
Yeah.
I wonder if is there any chance they would give him a left fielder's club. But we'll head on to the next topic, Frank. What do you? I know we brought back the Sean and I. A lot of Met fans are concerned that we have the lack of front end starting pitching. You just saw Nick Pivetta go to San Diego yesterday. What are your thoughts on the Mets pitching rotation in regard to competing in the National League?
It could be better, but I think the Mets are going to be a type of team that could land a pitcher.
Before the season or at the trade deadline?
At some point during the season, I think they can land a pitcher if they need one.
What do you think about the back end? The Cannings and the Montas? I was not a fan of them, but do you give the benefit of the doubt to David Stearns?
Yeah, David Stearns, I think, knows how to pick out pitchers. And the Mets were a hodgepodge last year, so what I like is that the bullpen looks improved.
Yeah.
We can get to that really quick while we're on that topic. You bring back Stanek, you add Minter. Do you have any hopes for Brazoban this season? It's not like he was a complete failure in Miami. Maybe an offseason in the pitching lab in this city.
We'll see. You know who's being forgotten about because I think he's going to miss like a couple of months? Pete Blackburn.
Yeah, Paul Blackburn. Right?
Paul Blackburn.
Yeah. They're actually just talking about him. David, right before you came on, we were playing a video of David Stearns on MLB Network, and they listed the depth at the starting pitching. And it's one thing David Stearns said he's way more comfortable this year than last year is the fact that they have those veterans, that extended veteran pitching depth, which they didn't have last year. He was talking about 10 games in, Frank. We were calling guys like Julio Teheran to come off the street and throw a game for us. That might change a lot.
Don't be surprised if Quintana maybe even gets another look.
What do you think he ends up getting? Do you think he gets a multi-year deal? Because I'm one of those guys. If you could get him at 1 year, $10 million with incentives, I'd be all over that, Frank.
No, he's not getting multi-year deal.
Do you think 1 for 10 is in the neighborhood?
Maybe 1 10 with a lot of bonuses. Yeah, that's possible. You know who I saw was working out? I bet you he ends up in Long Island or Staten Island. But if he shows any ability that he could get back to what he was,
Syndergaard.
Yes,
we were
Frank,
talking about that.
Let's
Give
go.
him that spring training invite.
Yeah,
why not? It doesn't hurt.
Definitely.
He's out there. Not as a starter, maybe, Frank. Frank, you see him coming out of the bullpen potentially?
Whatever he could do.
Right.
I mean, if he's anywhere where he was 2018, and I think the Mets fucked him, or he fucked himself. It's a little bit of both. I think the Mets being such an improper organization under Wilpon is what happened to him.
I totally agree. And I think his rehab was all screwed up. I mean, he clearly wanted out of here, Frank, because remember the whole situation with the Angels? The Mets give him the qualifying offer. He doesn't even turn around to them. He gets the hell out of here over, what was it, over $1 million? It was something like so small. And he didn't even give the Mets the opportunity to match. He left, so he was clearly.
Yeah, I don't think he I think he was just so jaded by the Wilpons that he didn't even think about the Coens. And what happened to him is he just became this like fitness junkie, whatever the hell it is. Zero body fat, where he just like worked out, and he put too much muscle on.
I agree. I think the same thing happened to Stanton too. That's why he gets injured all the time.
And
he's only 32. It's crazy.
And that he broke down, and he couldn't get back because he just kept getting hurt because he just kept lifting. And I think if the Mets had a proper organization that could tell him, it's great that you have this workout regimen, but you're losing flexibility, and you lose flexibility, you'll get injured. And the fact that the Mets didn't have an infrastructure allowed him basically to be on his own, and it like fucked him up.
It's crazy. He was pitching that wild card game in 16 as a 23-year-old. We didn't realize how good we had it. It's crazy looking back.
Yeah, we got him for R.A. Dickey, out of all people. Isn't that crazy? So, Frank, one thing another player I wanted to talk to you about, and I wanted to ask you, could you see any world? You probably can't, but I dream him making the team out of camp. A guy like Brandon Sproat, if he lights it up in spring training, I'm watching today. I know he's a prospect, but Frank, he's 24. He's no spring chicken. We're not talking about Felix Hernandez at 18 years old. The guy's 24 years old. He's throwing 100 miles an hour on day one. You're watching him face guys like you're watching him. Good.
If this was 40 years ago, yes. 30 years ago, yes. 20 years ago, maybe. It's just everyone has a program now for these pitching prospects, and lo and behold, they still get injured.
Yep.
So these pitching metrics, pitching programs, where they don't want them in the majors until a certain point, so they throw a certain amount of pitches. Out of spring training, no, but I do see it that he could be a chance where he comes up at some point this year, but I just can't see the Mets bringing him right from spring training. Yes, it's just they don't want him. I mean, look at Christian Scott last year, where he came up, he couldn't, the right-handers couldn't touch him, but he couldn't get lefties out, and then lefties would just like tattoo the ball off of him, and then he ends up getting Tommy John surgery anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
As long as velocity's still in the game, these pitchers are still going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They overthrow.
Right.
That's why DeGrom was so special, because when you see fluid 100 to where you see Syndergaard clearly, even like guys like Max Scherzer, where Max Scherzer his entire career was a max pitcher, right? Was he not? Yeah. It's very rare, but I wanted to get some of these comments, Frank, if you could. Hey, Frank, what do you think of Genesis Cabrera?
I don't know much about him.
Okay. 28 years old, hard thrower. It'll be interesting to see.
I think the question, because it's really he's a lefty, and that's the real problem with the Mets right now. We don't have that lefty. My question to you, quick, Frank, would you bring back Brooks Raley, or would you let that ship sail at this point?
Did he just sign?
Did he? If he did, I didn't know. I mean, but we need a lefty other than Danny Young and Minter.
When's he able to pitch?
Oh, maybe not.
It would be July.
Yeah.
Second half, maybe August, probably is the safer bet. Stash him for the playoffs. I mean, it's just an option, but we
maybe, but I don't know if you can count on him pitching this year.
Mm-hmm.
If you told me that he could pitch this year, I'd be all for signing him.
Right.
But I don't know if he can pitch this year.
36-year-old getting Tommy John. It's a risky play. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we have this from Mark. Syndergaard and Hefner as a pitching coach could be the comeback story. You had the feels, Frank?
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind giving Syndergaard just a look.
This is a question from Klub, who's one of our better contributors. Klub, shout out to you. It's not Mets related, but we all know what a savant you are, Frank. Frank, does Barry Bonds and steroid guys belong in the Hall of Fame?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that whole thing? Obviously, you said absolutely, but you don't think any of that should be discounted?
Well, there is a period of baseball called the dead ball era.
Mm-hmm.
We have pitchers in the Hall of Fame from the dead ball era. Do we discount their stats? Back then, pitchers could they didn't take the baseball out of play until it fell apart. So the ball would have would start unraveling, where some of the seams would be like loose, and they'd still pitch the ball because it was still usable. That if a ball got fouled off, they just keep the ball in play until the ball fell apart. And you could throw spitballs. The thing would be muddy and dirty and filthy, heavy, and they played with this. And no one they just call it the dead ball era. So you would do is you just label the 90s and that era from like 1990 per se, or maybe you want to go back 88 to 2008. You call that the steroid era. And because you've already put Bud Selig in the Hall of Fame.
Do you put an asterisk with these guys?
No, you just call it the steroid era.
So even if you didn't get caught doing steroids?
Yeah. I guarantee you there's steroid users in the Hall of Fame already.
Well, we already know David Ortiz was on the Mitchell Report, wasn't he?
Well, no.
Okay, he wasn't. I thought he was.
Well, he wasn't one of the names leaked, at least.
Right, but
here's something interesting. No Red Sox were on the Mitchell Report.
Manny Ramirez got busted years later.
Yeah. I forgot the guy's. What was the guy's first name? He was a senator.
I don't know.
But the guy who has the Mitchell Report was a senator from Maine, who is a part owner of the Red Sox.
Oh, there you go.
Makes a lot of sense.
We got this from Chris. Iglesias would be a bigger loss than people are thinking. Intangibles are important in baseball. We need OMG back, no doubt about it.
Yeah, we do.
John Mitchell. George Mitchell. That was his name. George Mitchell.
George Mitchell.
He's from Maine. He's the one who authored the Mitchell Report. Yeah.
Was it his own report, the Mitchell Report?
Yeah. Well, he was like.
Let me get everyone else in baseball.
He used to be the Democrat leader in the Senate.
Okay.
And he oversaw the Major League Baseball investigation after they had the Senate hearings. And
something new.
He called it the Mitchell Report, which was his group studying. But George Mitchell owns a piece of the Red Sox and is from Maine, so lo and behold, no Red Sox get leaked out. I just think that you just call it what it is. It's there are story guys already in the Hall of Fame. But Roger Clemens should be in. I mean, everyone should be in. If
Pete Rose belong in the Hall of Fame?
Yes, he does.
I agree. I actually agree with that one. Frank, let me ask you another question, because we've had this debate a lot throughout Mets Twitter. I mean, you're on X. You see us posting all the time. The the debate around Jeff McNeil in his second base position, is there any shot? Because I'm a firm believer, I don't think Acuna is going to make this opening day roster as long as McNeil's on the roster, because A, you don't want to have a young kid not playing every day, and B, I think McNeil's a lock to be the starting second baseman. And from what I heard was there were potential rifts between McNeil and management throughout the organization. Is there any chance they find a suitor for him, or is his value just so shot because of his down years at $15.5 million, I believe, this year, next year, and a club option the following
His value is shot that they can't get anything for him. But I think at a certain point that if he's struggling and Acuna's down in Syracuse tearing it up, the Mets might just bite the bullet and just dump him.
No kidding.
Especially if McNeil just had his attitude, like it becomes a drag.
I got you. All right, Frank. I appreciate you giving us this time. My final question to you is, how does this lineup suit out? Give us your at least top five. Come on, Frank. You think about it. Give us that top five, because Dan and I differ a lot. I'm one of those extender guys. I would like to see Nimmo get a shot towards the top of the lineup.
So would I.
The lineup.
So would I. But I know how baseball has changed the whole thinking.
Yep.
It's obviously going to be Lindor at the cleanup at the leadoff spot.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Soto 2. Alonso 3.
Vientos.
Nimmo 4.
Really?
Well, left, right. Yeah, I mean,
Vientos 5.
Right.
The left, right.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves that. I think 6. You'll see
Alvey.
McNeil. 7, Alvarez. 8, Winker. 9, Siri.
You always know you have a crappy DH. I always say that when he's hitting 8. Frank, come on. Like, we call a spade here. For me, I'm like, it should be Lindor, Nimmo, Soto. I don't care about the back-to-back righties. And when you have great talent, like hopefully Mark Vientos continues to be this year, and Soto, to me, it doesn't matter about the back-to-back righties. I mean, you heard Mendoza say it in his opening press conference that he's going to mess around, the righty-lefty thing. He goes, well, Soto, not so much, like, because Soto hits lefties, so it doesn't matter, in my opinion. It wouldn't matter. And
but I like the lefty-righty thing.
I get it. I'm just thinking I'm extending the lineup where I have Nimmo hitting probably 5th or 6th, where it extends it, because if they're going to ask him to be that pop guy, we saw the projections come out the other day. They haven't projected to be a 2,500 guy. 25 home runs, 100 RBIs, hit around 270-ish. I mean, I would take that.
Ideally, I would have Nimmo 2, Soto 4. Or Soto, Nimmo 2, Soto 3, Alonso 4.
Right, and then you would have Vientos 5. That's what I keep thinking.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Frank, one more from me. Thank you again for taking the time.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was a little late joining.
No, you're giving us time, Frank. It's totally cool.
No worries at all.
We almost had Nelson Figueroa jump on your spot, and I told him, you know what? Hold off till next Thursday. Go ahead, Dan.
From me, Frank, your favorite player in Mets history, and then maybe your favorite game in Mets history.
Well, my favorite players are Gooden, Piazza, Keith Hernandez, Gary Carter, Howard Johnson. Those will probably be among my favorite players. My favorite game, and I had to go to bed early in '86, so I didn't get to see Game 7, Game 6 live. I think probably my favorite game watching growing up was Game 6 against the Astros.
Got it.
That was my of course, the World Series and had their great games, but I just remember every moment of that game and every feel of that game.
Man, I would do anything to experience a World Series. We've come so close lately, it's just like you want to get over the hump. I guess, and look, I know what the Dodgers have; they're the favorites this year, but there's a reason
And I
why.
know Mike Scott dominated the Mets that series, and he still got the NLCS MVP. I think that they overlooked Jesse Orosco. He won 3 games in that series. Jesse Orosco won 3 games in the NLCS. No one's ever won 3 games in LCS. He's the only one who's ever done it.
Well, thank you, Frank. Honestly, I mean that's great. Game 6 is perfect. It's a great game.
You're right. You're
I
right.
wish I was alive for it too, honestly.
Yeah, and that's what the shame is
I mean,
honest,
Lenny Dykstra getting it started with the bloop over the head of I think it was Billy Hatcher was playing center field for the Astros, and the Mets just putting out 3 runs, and then the game just going on and on and on and on and on. It was like I got home. It was like the 8th inning. I got home from 6th grade, so I got home. It was like the 8th inning. Mets were down 3-0, and they game looked like it was just about over. The Mets were already they're already talking about Game 7, previewing Game 7, and then the Mets had that rally, and then it just went on and on and on and on and on and on. All throughout the late evening, early evening. Game finally ends like around just before, I think around 7 o'clock or something like that. It's
16 innings later.
Yeah, it's like an incredible game. Just like it just like the Mets took the lead in the 13th, and then Billy Hatcher tied the game with a ball off the foul pole. It was just an incredible game. Jesse Orosco's arm's about to fall off, and he strikes out Kevin Bass to win the game.
What a historian. What a historian.
No,
But
this
Frank,
is great, Frank. Thank you, honestly. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time, Frank. Guys, again, obviously, everybody knows Frank the Tank. Next Thursday night, Nelson just confirmed with me he's going to be joining us live Thursday night. We'll also be breaking down the Mets offseason. Who knows what's going to happen in between them? Any injuries? But
and
Frank,
I would like it. I do, and I would like Jose Iglesias back if it's possible.
Okay.
It's the same thing with Pete Alonso.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, Jose Iglesias didn't even play in the majors. He had a great year last year. I don't think he comes even close to matching what he did last year. I think just his presence is the only reason why the Mets are interested in bringing him back. Is just his the presence he gives. Where I'd like him to be in the organization even beyond his playing days as a coach or something like that. So
Coach/rapper.
Yeah. And I think for his music career, I think staying in New York is probably for the best for him.
Yes,
I agree.
So, who knows? The Mets played hardball with Pete Alonso and won. I mean, what this tells me is if I was unless I was like a top 5 major league player, I would never hire Scott Boras as my agent.
We've been saying that all offseason, Dan, haven't we been?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at what Jordan Montgomery went through last year. Even Blake Snell, thank God he had the good year and got paid. But even that, it's like...
Yeah, he hurts too many of his clients.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree.
Big market agent, not a middle market kind of guy for these.
And he has high expectations, and most of these teams laugh him out of the building.
Right. You have Prince Fielder kind of contracts for Pete Alonso. That's ridiculous.
I actually met Fielder's father during a softball tournament here on the line with my wife at the time, who was in softball. And when you talk to him, how devastated Prince is that what happened to him. And even him as a father, he's like, we still think about it every single day. And this is up to a few years ago. He's like, my son envisioned being a Hall of Famer one day, and it was kind of taken from him.
Yeah, it's just like his spine is David Wright sort of situation.
Mm-hmm. Frank, let me ask you.
The ironic thing is about Prince and Cecil Fielder. They both have the same amount of career home runs.
Yeah, wow.
It's like 300 and something.
Yeah, 319.
They both have 319 home runs. They both hit the same amount of home runs in the majors.
What are the odds? Then you see the Griffeys, and it's like completely the opposite. You got his son. His father was a great player too, but
Well, Ken Griffey Sr. was not a slugger. He was a prototypical speedy leadoff hitter. That's who he usually was.
Frank, in your mind, is DeGrom a free agent? Free agent. I am so shot of enough since 3M will work. Is DeGrom a Hall of Famer in your mind, or does he need to win another Cy Young?
Huh.
I ask all of our guests this. No one could ever be like, yes, no. It's like I gotta think about it. Think about this too. I wanted to. Look, Frank.
I think he can be. I think he merits Hall of Fame consideration.
He also did it during the Juice Bowl here.
he's got to get to 100 wins. I think.
Do you take that into consideration at all? You had guys like Gleyber Torres hitting 38, and he doesn't hit that for the next 3 years. You had guys like Jeff McNeil hitting 20+ home runs.
What happened with Gleyber Torres and Gary Sanchez, who was supposed to be the face of the Yankees, the fact that those two players it
was the Juice Bowl, Frank.
Such a way.
Had to be the Juice Bowl. Do you give DeGrom extra credit at all towards the extra credit, like it's class, like towards the Hall of Fame because he was so dominant during that Juice Bowl? I mean, think about Pete Alonso comes up, he breaks the home run record. Like we said,
yeah,
I would give him home runs. McNeil hitting 20+.
I'd give him a little extra credit. There was a game the Mets won, and you know how I feel about Todd Frazier. He sucked.
He was great in Little League.
Yeah, but he batted .203.
I know. That's the only reason why everybody knew about him is because
Todd Frazier. broken bat, check swing, falling on his ass. Hit a 3-run home run at Citi Field in 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, do you remember that home run? It was like the ugliest, the ugliest looking. It was at that point where Major League Baseball said, "Okay, yeah, it's juiced."
And he was like shocked when he bat flipped. He was like, "Whoa."
They did that because attendance was down, right? They were like trying to, and then they completely deadened the ball in the next year.
Well, the next year was the pandemic year.
I mean, let's be frank. 2019, that Juice Bowl year, DeGrom go 2.43 ERA in 204 innings pitched. I mean, he won the Cy Young in probably the most Juice Bowl era we've seen in the last 30 years since steroids came around. I mean, you literally had teams where they had 6 guys with 20+ home runs. That doesn't just happen throughout MLB.
No, it was. The home runs came cheaply that year. That was also the year that Edwin Diaz was just like awful, and Diaz said that his mind was in the blender. He was like every pitch I throw, it just shoots out.
He said the slider. He's like, I can't. There's no seams. To me, that's got voters going to have to take that into consideration.
Also makes another argument for the steroid era. You're saying you have variable seasons where you have juice balls and stats get jacked up.
Right. Yeah. Frank, this has been awesome, man. We love talking history with you. I want to thank you for your time. We're a little past that hour mark where we like to keep the podcast at.
All right. Well,
hopefully we'll have you on and we're not screaming at ownership and David Stearns again. Something this year. Are you going to be at opening day?
Yes, I will be.
All right, we're going to be doing a live podcast there. Maybe we could hook up or something. That's up to you.
All right, we'll see you around.
On the parking lot. We're going to be having a ton of people there. Hopefully, some special guests. I think Nelson's going to be there. Might be meeting up with him.
And this year I've moved my seats from 110 to 125.
I'll be sure to catch up with you if I don't see you in the parking lot.
All right. See you around.
Thanks so much,
Definitely.
Frank.
Thank
All right,
you,
everybody,
Frank.
that's been another episode. Thanks so much for hanging out. Don't forget, like and subscribe
All right. See you.
to this channel. And if you want to join us next week, we're gonna have Nelson Figueroa live with us. You got any last words, Dan?
No, I'm good. This was great, Frank. Thank you. Join. It was awesome. Thank you, everyone that tuned in.
Yep.
A lot of great stuff to be excited about. Spring training right around the corner.
That's right. I'll see y'all next week. Take care.